Chosen one, you've tried so hard to be normal. You show up, you smile, you sit among people and tell yourself, just stay a little longer. You nod, you laugh at the right moments, you play the part. Yet before the conversation even finds its depth, your soul already feels tired. You leave gatherings wondering why your heart feels heavier instead of fuller. You ask yourself, why does this drain me when it seems to energize everyone else? You feel it, don't you? The noise that isn't sound, the weight that isn't visible, the crowded energy pressing against your spirit. As you grow closer to God, this feeling only becomes stronger. Small talk feels empty. Forced connection feels suffocating. Hidden motives, unspoken, tension and shallow intentions register in you instantly. And quietly, you start questioning yourself. Chosen one, what's wrong with me? Why can't I handle what others seem fine with? Hear this clearly, you. God is not exposing a flaw. He is revealing your design. Your sensitivity is not weakness, it is protection. It is training. It is calling. You were never meant to blend into every room. You were meant to discern it. Your spirit reacts because it is alive, guarded, and aligned. And this is why crowds feel different to you. Chosen one. There was a season when the silence hurt more than the noise. You watched invitations fade, messages slow down, rooms feel farther away than they used to. You questioned yourself in quiet moments, wondering if you had done something wrong, if you had changed too much, or if God had quietly pushed you aside. But hear this gently and clearly. Now the separation you felt was never rejection. It was preservation. It was protection disguised as distance. God did not remove you from people to punish you. He removed you because your future could not survive their patterns. There were cycles around you that looked normal on the surface, but were corrosive underneath. Conversations that drained instead of built. Expectations that demanded performance instead of authenticity. Relationships that thrived on access to your energy but resisted your growth. If you had stayed, you would have shrunk to remain accepted. And God refused to let that happen to you. Chosen one, what felt like loneliness was actually space. Space for your nervous system to rest. Space for your spirit to breathe. Space for your discernment to sharpen without interference. God knows that some transformations cannot happen in crowds. Strength cannot be forged while constantly being watched, judged, or pulled back into old roles. So he quietly cleared the room, not because you were unworthy of connection, but because you were too valuable to be overstimulated and underprotected. You may remember nights when the absence felt heavy, when the quiet echoed and old fears tried to narrate the story for you. But even then, God was working. While others were distracted by validation and noise, you were being strengthened in private. You learned how to sit with yourself, how to hear God without translation, how to regulate your emotions without external reassurance. This was not abandonment. This was training. Chosen one, you were never being excluded. You were being prepared. Heaven has a long history of working this way. Moses was removed from the palace before he could lead a nation. David was isolated with sheep before he stood before kings. Jesus himself withdrew often, not because he disliked people, but because intimacy with God required separation from constant demand. You are not strange for needing distance. You are following a divine pattern. There were circles you once belonged to that could only recognize the old version of you. They knew how to interact with your survival self, your people-pleasing self, your over-giving self. But as God began maturing you, those environments became incompatible. Not evil, not malicious, just misaligned. And staying would have cost you clarity, peace, and obedience. God does not ask chosen ones to sacrifice destiny to maintain familiarity. At first, isolation feels like loss, but then something shifts. You begin to notice your prayers changing, your thoughts slowing down, your intuition becoming louder. You start to feel less reactive and more rooted. The separation that once scared you becomes a doorway. You realize you are not trapped. You are positioned. Not hidden in shame, but hidden in preparation. Chosen one, God often removes witnesses before he performs surgery. Not everyone is meant to see your healing. Not everyone can be trusted with your becoming. Some people would have tried to define you by your wounds instead of honoring your growth. So God protected the process by limiting access. This is why your isolation did not come with chaos, but with quiet instruction. This is why, even in loneliness, something inside you felt strangely intact. You are beginning to see now that solitude refined you. It taught you discernment without paranoia, confidence without arrogance, boundaries without guilt. You learned that being alone is not the same as being abandoned. One is absence of people, the other is absence of God, and God never left you. In fact, He came closer when the room emptied. Chosen one, the pain of separation was real, but it was not the full story. The deeper truth is, this God trusted you enough to prepare you privately. He believed you could endure the quiet without losing faith. He knew you would not numb yourself or harden your heart. He knew you would listen, and because you did, something powerful has been formed in you that noise could never produce. Now, when you look back, you can see it more clearly. The isolation was not a punishment, it was an invitation to become whole before becoming visible, to become anchored before becoming influential, to become obedient before becoming surrounded again. You were not pushed away, you were set apart, and chosen one. This separation will not last forever. God is not building a hermit, He is shaping a vessel. When He brings the right people back into your life, it will feel different. There will be no pressure to perform, no fear of shrinking, no exhaustion after connection. Until then, honor this season. It is not empty, it is sacred. Chosen one, there is a reason crowds exhaust you in ways you can't always explain. It isn't arrogance, it isn't weakness, and it isn't that something is wrong with you. It is because your spirit registers what others ignore, and that sensitivity carries weight. While many people move through rooms skimming the surface of conversations, you feel what sits underneath them. You notice pauses that linger too long, laughter that doesn't quite reach the eyes, compliments that feel rehearsed. You hear what isn't being said, and over time, that awareness becomes heavy. You've often wondered why your energy shifts in certain environments, even when nothing bad seems to be happening. On the outside, everything looks fine. People are smiling. The conversation is polite. The room is busy, but inside, your peace tightens. Your chest feels full. Your thoughts become noisy. You start absorbing emotions that aren't yours to carry. This is not imagination. This is discernment without boundaries, and it drains the chosen one quickly. Chosen one, your spirit is tuned to truth. You feel tension behind smiles. You sense competition hiding behind kindness. You recognize manipulation even when it's dressed as concern. While others may laugh it off or rationalize it away, your peace reacts immediately. And for a long time, you tried to override that reaction. You told yourself you were being dramatic. You told yourself to be more patient, more understanding, more flexible. You silenced your spirit to make others comfortable, and the cost was your own rest. In busy rooms, something subtle happens to you. You don't just hear conversations, you carry them. You don't just notice emotions, you absorb them. You walk away feeling responsible for moods you didn't create, tensions you didn't start, and expectations no one clearly voiced. Your heart begins carrying burdens that do not belong to you. This is why social settings can leave you exhausted, even when nothing outwardly went wrong. Your spirit was working overtime while others were simply passing time. God is beginning to teach you something essential. Now discernment must be paired with boundaries. Sensitivity without limits becomes suffering. Awareness without wisdom becomes overload. You are never meant to carry every atmosphere you walk into. You are meant to recognize, not absorb. But no one taught you that early on. So you learned survival instead of stewardship. You stayed longer than you should have. You listened when you should have left. You explained when silence would have protected you. Chosen one, this is why God has been drawing you away from constant social exposure. He is not isolating you out of fear. He is retraining your spirit. He is teaching you the difference between empathy and self-betrayal, between compassion and overextension, between discernment and responsibility. Just because you can sense something does not mean you must fix it. Just because you feel it does not mean it belongs to you. You are learning now that your peace is a signal, not an obstacle. When your spirit tightens, it is not demanding endurance, it is requesting distance. When your energy drops suddenly around certain people, it is not weakness, it is information. God communicates with chosen ones through internal responses long before external facts become obvious. The mistake was never your sensitivity. The mistake was thinking you had to override it to be loving. Chosen one, many people can tolerate crowds because they are not fully present in them. They skim, distract, perform, or dissociate. You don't. You arrive whole. You listen deeply. You see clearly. That depth is a gift, but it requires protection. God is teaching you that not every room deserves your full presence. Not every conversation deserves your full attention. And not everyone gets access to your emotional labor. As you mature, you'll notice a shift. Instead of questioning yourself, after feeling overwhelmed, you'll start honoring the signal. Instead of forcing yourself to stay, you'll give yourself permission to leave. Instead of explaining why you feel off, you'll trust that you don't need justification to protect your peace. This is not selfishness. This is stewardship. Chosen one, God is not asking you to become cold or distant. He is asking you to become discerning with wisdom. There is a difference between love and exposure. Jesus loved crowds, but he did not give them constant access. He withdrew often. He chose small circles. He left rooms when necessary. And he never apologized for protecting his communion with God. You are learning that same rhythm now. Crowds are not evil, but they are not neutral either. They amplify energy, and because your spirit is receptive, amplification drains you faster. This is why God is teaching you to limit access to pause before engaging, to check in with your spirit before committing your presence. Chosen one, your sensitivity is not a liability. It is a compass. But a compass only works when you're willing to follow it. God is helping you unlearn the habit of ignoring your inner knowing. He is showing you that peace is not something you earn after endurance. It is something you protect through obedience. As you begin honoring this truth, something changes. You stop leaving rooms feeling empty. You stop carrying what isn't yours. You stop confusing exhaustion with love. And slowly, gently, your spirit learns how to rest again. Not because the world became quieter, but because you learned when to step away. This is not withdrawal. This is wisdom. This is the chosen one, learning how to walk through life awake, aware, and unburdened. Chosen one, there was a season when you believed being surrounded by many people meant you were supported, protected, and moving in the right direction. You thought that more voices meant more confirmation, more wisdom, more safety. But slowly, almost quietly, God began revealing a deeper truth to you. Too many voices do not strengthen a calling, they blur it. And your assignment was never meant to be shaped by the crowd. At first, it was subtle. After conversations, you felt tired in a way rest couldn't fix. After listening to advice, you felt less clear than before. After being around too many opinions, your certainty weakened. You began questioning things God had already settled in your spirit, not because you lacked faith, but because your inner signal was being interrupted by external noise. Chosen one, every divine assignment carries a specific frequency. It requires clarity, precision, and alignment. But crowds operate differently. Crowds are loud, reactive, opinionated. They speak from experience, fear, comparison, and projection. And while many people mean well, most speak from where they are, not from where God is taking you. You noticed this tension when people labeled their fear as concern. They questioned your pace, your decisions, your silence. They asked why you weren't rushing, proving, or explaining yourself. Some offered advice that sounded practical, but felt heavy. Others projected their disappointments onto your future, and called it realism. And each time, something inside you tightened. Chosen one, that tightening was not confusion, it was discernment. Your spirit recognized misalignment, even when your mind tried to rationalize it. You felt the distortion happening in real time. One voice pulled you in one direction. Another questioned your faith. Another suggested delay. Another encouraged compromise. And suddenly the clear instruction God had given you began to feel distant. This is why you started noticing something profound: clarity always returned in solitude. When you stepped away from conversations, from opinions, from explanations, your spirit settled. In prayer, the noise faded. In stillness, God's voice felt familiar again. Not louder, not dramatic, just steady, grounded, and unmistakable. The same voice that had spoken to you before the crowd ever had access. Chosen one, God has always trained his chosen in isolation before releasing them into influence. Moses met God in the wilderness. David was shaped in fields no one applauded. Jesus withdrew from crowds constantly, not because he lacked compassion, but because alignment mattered more than attention. God knows something about human voices. Even well-meaning ones can dilute divine instruction. When too many people have access to you, identity begins to blur. You start adjusting how you speak. You soften convictions. You delay obedience to avoid misunderstanding. You explain things God never asked you to explain. And slowly, without realizing it, the assignment becomes shaped by reaction instead of revelation. Chosen one, your calling is not democratic. It does not require consensus. It requires obedience. And obedience becomes difficult when you are constantly surrounded by voices that question what God already confirmed. This is why God has been drawing you into quieter spaces, not to punish you, not to isolate you forever, but to recenter you. You are learning now that not every opinion deserves consideration. Not every suggestion requires response. Not every voice belongs in the room where God gives instruction. This doesn't make you prideful. It makes you disciplined. It means you are learning to protect what is sacred. Crowds tend to value visibility. God values alignment. Crowds ask, "What will people think?" God asks, "Will you trust me?" And when those two questions collide, maturity is choosing God, even when it costs approval. Chosen one, you have felt the difference. When you were surrounded by many voices, your spirit felt scattered. When you stepped back into quiet, your vision sharpened. Your confidence stabilized. Your sense of direction returned. This is not coincidence. This is training. God is teaching you how to hear him clearly so that when the time comes to move, you move without hesitation. Too many voices don't just distort direction, they distort timing. People rush what God is developing. They pressure what God is refining. They misunderstand seasons and label patience as fear. And if you listen long enough, you begin doubting the pace God intentionally chose for you. But chosen one, your assignment requires timing as much as courage. Moving early would have cost you. Speaking too soon would have exposed you. Explaining prematurely would have weakened your authority. God knows this. That is why he began reducing the noise around you. This season of quiet is not emptiness. It is alignment. God is clearing the room so he can speak without competition. He is removing interference so you can remember what his voice feels like without echo. He is not taking people away to hurt you, but to protect the purity of what he placed inside you. And something powerful happens as a result. You stop oscillating between confidence and doubt. You stop asking for permission to obey. You stop explaining your calling to people who cannot steward it. You become anchored instead of reactive, focused instead of scattered. Chosen one, your assignment does not need applause to succeed. It needs clarity. It needs obedience. It needs alignment. And alignment is rarely found in crowds. God is not shrinking your world. He is sharpening your focus. He is teaching you that silence is not absence and solitude is not loss. It is preparation. It is protection. It is positioning. So when you feel drawn away from too many voices, honor it. When you feel peace returning only in quiet prayer, trust it. When you feel resistant to crowded opinions, recognize it as wisdom, not rebellion. God is recentering you because you are close to movement, close to execution, close to a season where clarity will matter more than comfort. And in that season, your ability to hear God clearly will be everything. Chosen one, there was a season when you believed availability was love. You thought that being present for everyone, responding to every need, listening to every story, and opening yourself fully was proof of kindness and maturity. You wanted to be understood, valued, and connected, so you offered yourself freely, often without discernment, often without rest. But over time, something inside you began to ache in a way words could not explain. You were giving yet shrinking. You were surrounded yet empty. And God, in His quiet precision, began to teach you a truth that would change how you live. Your energy is sacred, not public property. You were never meant to be accessible to everyone. Being chosen does not mean being consumed. It means being set apart, not elevated above others, but protected for purpose. You began to notice that some people didn't come close to understand you. They came close to borrow from you. They leaned on your strength without offering support. They drew from your clarity without respecting your boundaries. They compared themselves to you, measured themselves against you, and quietly resented the peace you carried. And because you were compassionate, you tolerated more than you should have. Chosen one, God began revealing patterns you once ignored. You realized that some connections were transactional, not mutual. Some conversations drained rather than nourished. Some people felt entitled to your time, your emotional labor, your spiritual insight simply because you had once given it freely. You started recognizing the difference between being generous and being depleted, between being loving and being overexposed. This awakening did not come with anger. It came with grief. You mourned the version of yourself that believed love required self-erasure. You grieved the moments you stayed too long, explained too much, and gave past the point of wisdom. But God did not shame you for this. He gently reframed it. He showed you that your heart was pure, but your boundaries were undeveloped, and now He was maturing both. You learned something profound. Your presence carries weight. When you enter a room, the atmosphere shifts not because you demand attention, but because your spirit is aligned. Your words land deeply. Your silence speaks loudly. Your compassion feels safe. And because of this, not everyone should have access to you. Sacred things are not placed in common spaces. They are guarded, honored, and approached with reverence. Chosen one, God began teaching you that your yes is a seed. Every time you say yes, something grows, something is invested, something is released. But He also showed you that your no is a shield. It protects your peace. It guards your assignment. It preserves your strength. Saying no does not make you unloving. It makes you obedient. It means you understand that not every request is an assignment and not every opportunity is aligned. As this truth settled into your spirit, you began treating your presence differently. You stopped showing up to be consumed. You stopped entering spaces where you had to perform, explain, or compete. You stopped proving your worth through availability. Instead, you began honoring your energy as something God entrusted to you, not something others could claim. You realized that being chosen means not everyone gets access to your inner world. Some people are meant to see the fruit of your life, not the roots. Some are meant to benefit from your impact, not your process. And some connections must remain at a distance, not out of judgment, but out of wisdom. Chosen one, this shift changed how you loved. You became more intentional, not colder, more discerning, not distant. You learned to ask a quiet question before engaging. Is this aligned or is this draining? And when the answer was draining, you no longer argued with your spirit. You trusted it. God showed you that your presence is like an altar. It is a place where peace rests, where truth lives, where clarity flows. An altar is not entertainment. It is not casual. It is sacred. And those who approach it must do so with respect, humility, and clean hands. You stop trying to be understood by everyone and started being faithful to what God placed within you. This did not isolate you. It refined you. It made your connections deeper, not fewer. It protected your joy. It strengthened your voice. And it taught you that the right people do not drain your energy. They honor it. They don't demand access. They respect boundaries. They don't consume. They contribute. Chosen one, you are no longer available by default. You are available by discernment. And that discernment is not fear-based. It is purpose-driven. God is teaching you that sacred things must be guarded if they are to last. Your energy, your peace, your presence, your calling. These are not public resources. They are divine trusts. As you continue walking this truth, you will notice a quiet strength rising within you. You will no longer feel guilty for protecting your space. You will no longer explain your boundaries. You will no longer confuse accessibility with love. You will stand grounded, steady, and whole, knowing that God Himself taught you how to steward what is sacred. And in that stewardship, your life will become lighter, clearer, and more powerful than ever before. Chosen one, there is a reason certain environments leave you feeling smaller than you were moments before you entered them. It is not because you are regressing, and it is not because your growth was fragile. It is because crowds can awaken versions of you that God already healed, and your spirit recognizes the danger before your mind names it. This is why God has been teaching you to pay attention to how you feel in certain spaces, not as a judgment of others, but as protection for who you have become. You noticed it slowly. In large groups, something subtle begins to happen. You feel an unspoken pressure to explain yourself, to perform, to keep up, to be impressive or agreeable. Conversations move quickly, shallowly, and competitively. Stories turn into comparisons. Opinions turn into measurements. And without realizing it, your nervous system shifts back into survival mode. You begin scanning for approval instead of resting in identity. You begin managing perception instead of walking in truth. This is not because you are weak. It is because those environments were built for an older version of you, a version that learned to survive through adaptation rather than alignment. God is not condemning you for this reaction. He is revealing it so you can grow beyond it. Chosen one, you have worked hard to heal. You learn to be still. You learn to listen to God's voice instead of reacting to people's expectations. You learn to value peace over performance, but crowds, especially chaotic or drama-centered ones, often run on old currencies: noise, urgency, validation, and competition. When you step into those spaces, your body remembers patterns your spirit no longer wants to repeat. You feel it when conversations revolve around gossip instead of growth, when people bond through complaining rather than compassion, when attention becomes a currency and everyone is quietly negotiating for it. Your inner peace begins to shrink, not because it is weak, but because it does not belong there. God is showing you that some environments are built on chaos. Not love, and chaos always demands participation. In those moments, you may feel tempted to shrink yourself just to get through it. You smile when you want silence. You agree when you want distance. You explain when you want to rest. And afterward, you feel exhausted, confused, or irritated with yourself for tolerating something your spirit clearly resisted. This is not failure. This is awareness rising faster than habit. Chosen one, God, is protecting you from environments that would pull you backward emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Not because those places are evil, but because they activate coping mechanisms you no longer need. He knows that if you stay too long, you will begin carrying tension that is not yours, absorbing emotions that are not meant for you, and slowly dimming the clarity you worked so hard to regain. You are learning a mature truth. Now, walking away is not pride, it is wisdom. Choosing not to engage is not avoidance, it is discernment. There was a time when you stayed because you were afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of seeming distant, afraid of losing connection. But now God is teaching you that not every connection is meant to continue into every season. Crowds often reward performance, but God rewards presence. Crowds invite comparison, but God calls you to alignment. Crowds pull you into reacting, but God trains you to respond. This is why your spirit resists environments that demand constant output without offering safety. You are no longer built for survival rooms. You are built for sacred ones. Chosen one, the pressure you feel in certain spaces is not external. It is internal conflict between who you were trained to be and who you are becoming. God is gently severing your dependence on approval so that your obedience can stand alone. He is showing you that peace is fragile only when it is borrowed from people instead of rooted in Him. As you honor this truth, something shifts. You begin excusing yourself sooner. You stop over-explaining your absence. You trust your body's response as valid information rather than something to suppress. You stop romanticizing environments that consistently cost you your peace. And instead of guilt, you feel relief. This is maturity. This is growth. This is the chosen one learning how to steward healing. God is not asking you to reject people. He is asking you to reject environments that require you to abandon yourself. Love does not demand self-betrayal. Community does not require chaos, and connection does not have to come at the expense of your nervous system. Chosen one. The reason crowds trigger old versions of you is because you have outgrown them. And outgrowing something does not mean it was bad. It means its purpose in your life has been fulfilled. God is not calling you to isolate, but He is calling you to be selective, intentional, and honest about what your spirit can carry. As you continue honoring this discernment, you will notice that peace becomes your guide instead of guilt. You will stop forcing yourself into rooms where your soul must armor up. You will choose environments where you can breathe, listen, and remain whole. And slowly the old versions of you will lose their grip, not because you fought them, but because you stopped feeding them. Chosen one, this is not retreat. This is refinement. God is shaping you into someone who can walk through life grounded, unprovoked, and deeply rooted. And that kind of strength does not come from enduring chaos, but from knowing when to step away from it. Chosen one, there comes a moment in your walk with God when expansion no longer looks like addition, but like reduction. It feels counterintuitive, at first almost unsettling, because the world taught you that growth means more people, more visibility, more affirmation. Yet God often works in the opposite direction. He shrinks the circle to strengthen the core, not to make you small, but to make you solid. What appears like loss on the outside is actually purification on the inside. You noticed it gradually. Conversations faded. Invitations slowed. Familiar faces drifted without explanation. At first, you wondered if you had done something wrong. You searched your heart, replayed moments, questioned your tone, your absence, your boundaries. But God was not correcting you. He was refining you. He was removing distractions so that your heart could become a place of clarity rather than confusion. Chosen one, when your circle was large, your attention was divided. You tried to be present for many voices, many needs, many expectations. Even with good intentions, your energy scattered. Your discernment dulled. Your prayer life felt crowded. God, in His mercy, began closing the gates gently. Not because people were bad, but because your season required focus, not familiarity. Scripture reveals this pattern again and again. Gideon's army was reduced before victory. Jesus chose 12, then 3, then often withdrew alone. God consistently removes excess before releasing power. Why? Because strength multiplies when motives are pure and focus is clear. God does not pour new wine into cluttered vessels. He prepares containers that can carry weight without spilling. As your circle shrank, something else sharpened. Your vision. You stopped needing constant feedback. You stopped asking everyone what they thought. You stopped rehearsing decisions aloud to test reactions. Instead, you learned to wait for one clear instruction from God, and when it came, it felt steady, not rushed, grounded, not emotional. The noise left, and discipline took its place. Chosen one, discipline is not punishment. It is freedom with structure. God replaced popularity with purity, not to deprive you, but to protect you. He knew that affirmation from many would eventually compete with obedience to one. He knew that constant access would dilute your authority, and he knew that the future he prepared for you required a heart trained in solitude before it could lead in strength. This reduction was not accidental. It exposed motives you didn't know you carried. You realized how often you said yes to feel needed, how often you stayed connected to avoid discomfort, how often you confused loyalty with endurance. God did not shame you for this. He simply created conditions where those patterns could no longer survive. In the quiet, you saw yourself clearly, and clarity brought healing. Your smaller circle became a mirror rather than a stage. The few who remained did not compete with your calling. They did not rush your growth. They did not demand access to your inner world. Instead, they honored your boundaries, celebrated your obedience, and respected your silence. You felt lighter around them, not drained, seen, not measured, safe, not scrutinized. Chosen one God was teaching you something. Vital quality sustains destiny. Quantity distracts it. A large circle can amplify noise, but a refined core amplifies truth. With fewer voices, your prayer became deeper. Your decisions became cleaner. Your confidence stopped rising and falling based on reaction. You no longer needed many people to feel validated. You needed alignment to feel whole. There is a sacredness to this season that others may not understand. Some may interpret your distance as arrogance. Others may assume you changed. And in a way you did. You matured. You learned that not everyone who walks with you can walk into every season with you. You learned that God sometimes separates to preserve. And preservation is not rejection, it is preparation. As your circle grew smaller, your capacity grew larger. You became able to carry responsibility without resentment, to listen without absorbing, to lead without proving. God was building something lasting in you, something that could withstand pressure without fracturing. Hidden seasons produce lasting power, and you are living proof of that truth. Chosen one, this refinement is not permanent isolation, it is strategic positioning. God is strengthening the core so that when expansion comes, it does not destroy you. He was anchoring you so that future connections align with purpose rather than preference. And when he adds again, it will be with intention, not overwhelm. You now understand something you once feared. Fewer people does not mean less love. It often means truer love. It means relationships that can grow with you rather than hold you back. It means conversations that nourish instead of drain. It means a life guided by clarity rather than noise. God did not shrink your circle to limit you. He shrank it to protect what he is building. And what he is building inside you is strong, steady, and ready for what comes next. Chosen one, after all the seasons, God has walked you through the quiet withdrawals, the misunderstood distance, the inner refinement that happened when no one was watching. Something begins to shift in a way that feels gentle rather than dramatic. God does not leave you standing alone in isolation. He does not refine your heart only to abandon it. Instead, at the precise moment your spirit is strong enough to discern without fear or attachment, he begins to introduce the right people into your life, and they feel nothing like the connections you had to outgrow. The first thing you notice is not excitement or intensity. It is relief. Your body responds before your mind has time to analyze it. Your shoulders relax. Your breathing deepens. There is no inner tension preparing for misunderstanding, no quiet anxiety about saying the wrong thing or being too much or not enough. You do not feel the need to perform, explain, or manage perception. You are simply present, and presence feels safe. That alone tells you this connection is different. For so long, chosen one, you lived around people who required effort just to be near. You learned to adjust your tone, soften your truth, anticipate reactions, and give more than you had in order to keep the atmosphere comfortable. You became skilled at reading rooms and regulating others' emotions, and over time you mistook that exhaustion for love. No one taught you that real connection does not drain your nervous system. and no one showed you that peace can exist alongside intimacy. The right people feel different because they do not demand energy, they return it. They do not pull you into urgency or emotional chaos, but anchor you in calm presence. Conversation flows without force or performance. Silence does not feel awkward or threatening, but natural and grounded. You are not rushing to fill gaps or defend boundaries. You are not shrinking or overextending yourself. You are allowed to be exactly who you are without explanation or apology. God is teaching you now that peace is not passive, and it is not accidental. Peace is the clearest confirmation of alignment. The right people do not compete with your calling or question the pace God has set for your growth. They do not rush your healing or demand constant access to your inner world. They trust the connection without trying to control it, and they respect your boundaries because they recognize wisdom, not distance. You begin to notice how clean these interactions feel. There is no hidden agenda beneath kind words, no emotional borrowing disguised as closeness, no subtle comparison or quiet resentment. You leave conversations feeling clearer, steadier, and more grounded than before, not confused or depleted. That clarity lingers, reinforcing what your spirit already knows. This connection does not cost you yourself. Chosen one, these people arrive differently because they are sent differently. God introduces them gently and intentionally. There is no rush toward intimacy, no dramatic attachment, no pressure to merge lives quickly. Trust builds organically, layer by layer, because it is rooted in alignment rather than intensity. You are not drawn to them out of loneliness or nostalgia, but because something in your spirit recognizes safety and familiarity without fear. This is where your understanding of community begins to change at its foundation. You realize that you never needed many people, no matter how strongly the world insisted otherwise. You needed faithful ones, people faithful to truth, faithful to growth, faithful to God's timing, and faithful to peace. The right people do not confuse availability with loyalty. They understand that distance does not equal disconnection, and silence does not mean abandonment. You notice something else that matters deeply. These connections do not awaken old versions of you that God already healed. You are not pulled back into survival mode or people-pleasing patterns. You do not feel the urge to explain your past, justify your growth, or minimize your convictions. Instead, you expand quietly. Your discernment stays sharp. Your confidence remains intact. Your peace does not shrink in their presence. These people do not drain your clarity. They protect it. God is healing the way you relate, chosen one. He is teaching you that love does not require self-betrayal, that connection does not require exhaustion, and that being seen does not require being consumed. The right people meet you where you are without trying to reshape you. They do not ask you to dim your depth or speed up your process. They respect the sacred pace God has set for your life, even when they do not fully understand it. With the right people, you no longer feel guilty for needing space. You do not feel pressured to respond immediately or to explain why you withdrew for prayer or rest. These relationships are not built on constant reassurance or emotional dependency, but on mutual trust and respect. That trust gives you freedom rather than obligation, and it allows you to remain grounded instead of anxious. You begin to understand that healthy connection does not cling. It does not demand proof of loyalty or constant access to feel secure. It rests, it trusts, it honors. God is retraining your spirit to recognize safety, not through intensity, but through steadiness. For a long time, you confused emotional highs with intimacy and urgency with importance. Now you are learning that the healthiest relationships are often the quietest ones, the ones that do not announce themselves loudly, but remain consistent and life-giving. These people honor your walk with God rather than competing with it. They do not try to replace divine guidance or position themselves as your source. They encourage obedience rather than questioning it. When you speak about what God is doing in you, they listen without envy or fear. When you need solitude, they understand without offense. Their presence feels like support, not surveillance. This is fellowship as God intended it. Chosen one, Not chaotic, not consuming, not conditional, but strengthening and stabilizing. Fellowship that sharpens rather than blurs, that nourishes rather than drains, and that feels holy because it honors the spirit instead of just the personality. God is not restoring your circle to what it once was. He is redefining it entirely. Fewer people, deeper alignment, stronger foundations. The right people are not there to complete you or fill a void. They walk beside you as you remain anchored in God. They do not replace divine guidance, but quietly confirm it through peace, consistency, and respect. You now understand why separation was necessary. Without it, you would not have learned discernment. Without it, you might have welcomed noise instead of alignment. Without it, you would not recognize the difference between pressure and peace. God refined your heart so that when the right people arrived, you could receive them without fear, dependency, or attachment. Chosen one, you are no longer seeking connection out of emptiness. You are grounded whole and anchored. From that place, the right people naturally find you, not because you chase them, but because peace attracts peace, and alignment recognizes alignment. You understand now that you do not need many voices around you. You need faithful ones. You do not need constant company. You need aligned presence. And you do not need to be understood by everyone. You need to be honored by the few God sends. This is not the end of isolation. It is the beginning of alignment. God has proven that every season of distance had purpose, and that purpose was to prepare you for connections that do not drain your spirit, distort your calling, or demand your energy. When the right people enter your life, chosen one, you will not feel pressure to hold on or fear of losing them. You will not question yourself or overanalyze the connection. You will simply recognize them by the peace they bring, and in that peace you will know that God has restored connection, not noise, and alignment, not distraction. Chosen one. Everything God has been doing in your life has never been random, and it has never been only about you. The separation, the silence, the shrinking of your circle, the deep inner work, all of it has been shaping you into something specific. You were not pulled away from the crowd because you were fragile. You were pulled away because you were being positioned. God has been forming you into a lighthouse, not a wave. And a lighthouse does not chase ships, shout for attention, or move with the storm. It stands still, rooted and illuminated, so others can find their way without you losing yourself. For a long time, you thought your solitude meant disconnection. You wondered if you were falling behind, missing out, or becoming irrelevant. But God was doing something far more intentional. He was building depth in you so that one day you could carry others without drowning. He was strengthening your foundation so that when people lean on you, you do not collapse under the weight. A lighthouse must be anchored deeply, or it will fall the moment the storm rises. God was anchoring you. Chosen one, you are learning now that your presence has impact even when you say nothing. Rooms shift when you enter, not because you demand attention, but because you carry peace. Conversations soften, chaos slows. People feel calmer without knowing why. This is not personality. This is alignment. You have spent so much time with God that His peace has begun to settle into you, and that peace radiates outward naturally. God never intended for you to blend into noise. He designed you to be a point of reference. When people are lost, overwhelmed, or exhausted by the world, they are drawn to those who are steady. And steadiness does not come from activity. It comes from depth. Your quiet seasons were not empty. They were excavations digging space inside you so that light could live there without flickering. Chosen one, a lighthouse does not move toward danger. It does not jump into the sea to rescue every ship. It shines, and in shining, it guides. This is a lesson God has been teaching you slowly and patiently. You are not called to save everyone. You are not responsible for fixing every storm. Your role is not to drown in other people's chaos. Your role is to remain whole so that others can orient themselves by your steadiness. You are beginning to understand now why God taught you boundaries. Without them, your light would burn out. Why He taught you discernment. Without it, you would shine in the wrong direction. Why he taught you to value peace over approval. Without that lesson, your light would flicker depending on who was watching. God was never hardening your heart. He was strengthening your spine. Chosen one, your life is becoming a refuge, not because you offer answers to everything, but because you offer presence without panic. People are tired of noise. They are tired of urgency, competition, and performance. When they encounter you, something feels different. They do not feel judged or rushed. They feel safe enough to breathe. And that safety is not accidental. It was formed in the seasons where you learned to sit with God when no one else could see you. God is showing you now that separation shaped you so you could serve with strength, not depletion. If you had remained in constant crowds, your light would have been scattered. If you had stayed in environments that demanded performance, your peace would have been fragile. If you had kept giving without boundaries, your spirit would have been exhausted. God removed you not to isolate you, but to concentrate you. As a lighthouse, you will notice something important. Not everyone will like your stillness. Some people are uncomfortable around calm because chaos is familiar to them. Your peace will confront their unrest without you saying a word. Your boundaries will expose their lack of discipline. Your silence will challenge their noise. This is not your responsibility to manage. A lighthouse does not dim its light to make darkness comfortable. Chosen one, God is not positioning you to be admired. He is positioning you to be useful in the right way. Your strength will not come from force, but from consistency. Your influence will not come from volume, but from depth. People will not follow you because you persuade them, but because they trust the peace you carry. You will also begin to notice that God sends people to you differently now. They do not come to consume you. They come to rest, to reflect, to recalibrate. And you will know when to offer space and when to remain silent. Your wisdom will not be loud. It will be timely. And because you are no longer trying to be everything to everyone, you will finally have the capacity to be present in the moments that matter. Chosen one, this is why God trained you to stand alone without collapsing. A lighthouse must withstand wind waves and isolation. It must remain upright when everything around it moves. You learned how to be steady in seasons where nothing made sense, and now that steadiness has become part of who you are. You are no longer shaken by every opinion or pulled by every expectation. You are rooted. You understand now that your solitude had a mission. It was not wasted time. It was formation. God was shaping your inner world so that your outer presence could bring calm instead of confusion. You are becoming someone who carries peace into rooms rather than absorbing anxiety from them. Someone who listens without losing themselves. Someone who stands firm without becoming rigid. Chosen one, your life is beginning to speak louder than your words ever could. People may not understand your journey, but they feel its result. They sense the depth. They recognize the stability. And in a world full of movement, speed, and noise, stability is rare. That is why your presence matters. You are not meant to shine everywhere. You are meant to shine faithfully where God has placed you. And as you do, ships will find their way. Storms will be navigated. People will see clearly without you ever having to step into the water. This is the truth God wanted you to understand. Separation did not weaken you. It positioned you. Silence did not erase you. It refined you. And solitude did not isolate you. It transformed you into a lighthouse, steady, grounded and carrying light that does not flicker when the storm comes. Chosen one, something subtle but irreversible has shifted within you. You no longer chase connection, validation, recognition, or belonging the way you once did. Not because you stopped caring, and not because you became detached from humanity, but because God removed the hunger that was never meant to drive you. The ache to be seen has been replaced with the certainty of being known by Him. And when that happens, the world responds differently. There was a time when you moved toward people, hoping they would understand you, affirm you, or give meaning to what you carried. You explained yourself carefully. You tried to fit your depth into conversations that could not hold it. You adjusted your tone, your pace, your presence, believing that if you showed enough kindness, patience, and effort, you would finally be met. But that season has ended, not with bitterness, but with maturity. Now, chosen one, you move from fullness instead of need. You are no longer scanning rooms for acceptance. You are no longer shaping yourself to be palatable. You are no longer negotiating your worth through effort. And that inner shift changes everything. When you stop chasing, you stop leaking energy. When you stop leaking energy, your presence becomes grounded. And when your presence becomes grounded, it becomes noticeable without effort. You may not even realize it at first, but people begin to sense the difference. They cannot quite name it. They just know something about you feels settled, rooted, unbothered. You are no longer reaching outward. You are anchored inward. Your words carry weight because they are not trying to convince. Your silence carries authority because it is not empty. You are not seeking to be impressive, yet your presence lingers. Chosen one. This is one of the quiet rewards of alignment. When you stop chasing the world begins to recognize you not because you demanded attention, but because truth draws attention naturally. People are drawn to stability in a time of constant movement. They are drawn to clarity in a culture of confusion. They are drawn to peace in a world addicted to noise. You will notice that recognition comes differently now. It does not arrive as applause or spectacle. It comes as respect, as curiosity, as people pausing when you speak, as opportunities finding you without you forcing them, as doors opening without you knocking repeatedly. This is not coincidence. This is alignment producing gravity. God is teaching you that influence does not come from pursuit. It comes from position. When you are positioned correctly, you do not have to advertise your value. It becomes evident. When you are aligned with God, you do not have to prove your calling. It unfolds. And when you are rooted in peace, you do not have to defend your boundaries. They speak for themselves. Chosen one. This shift may feel unfamiliar at times. There are moments when you wonder if you should be doing more, saying more, reaching out more. That is the echo of old conditioning, not the voice of wisdom. God is teaching you to trust stillness as a form of strength. He is showing you that fruit grows naturally when the roots are healthy. You do not pull on branches to make fruit appear. You tend the soil, and the soil of your life has been tended carefully. Through solitude, through discipline, through saying no when it would have been easier to say yes, through walking away from noise without explanation, through choosing obedience over visibility. These were not small decisions, they were foundational choices, and now their impact is beginning to show. People will begin to approach you differently, some with respect, some with curiosity, some with hesitation. You may notice that those who once overlooked you now pay attention, not because you changed your strategy, but because you changed your center. Others may feel unsettled around you, not because you did anything to them, but because your groundedness exposes their restlessness. This is not your burden to carry. A rooted tree does not apologize for standing firm. Chosen one, God is also protecting you in this season. Because as recognition increases, so does discernment. You are no longer impressed by attention. You are no longer seduced by access. You have learned that not everyone who notices you is meant to walk with you. Some are meant to observe. Some are meant to learn. Some are meant to be redirected by your example. You no longer confuse visibility with intimacy. This is where maturity shows. You can be seen without being consumed. You can be acknowledged without being attached. You can receive honor without losing humility. Because your identity is no longer built on response, it is built on relationship with God. And that relationship keeps you steady no matter who is watching. Chosen one, the most powerful part of this shift is that you remain the same whether the world notices or not. Recognition does not inflate you. Silence does not diminish you. You are not moved by either. That steadiness is rare, and rarity attracts attention without effort. God is showing you that this is what happens when a life is aligned. Momentum replaces striving. Clarity replaces confusion. Presence replaces performance. You stop running toward the future, and the future begins to meet you. Opportunities align naturally. Connections form organically. Timing unfolds without force. You understand now why God had to remove you from constant crowds, why He had to quiet your world, why He had to teach you to stand alone without fear. If a recognition had come earlier, it would have overwhelmed you. If attention had arrived before grounding, it would have distracted you. God waited until your core was strong enough to hold what He was about to release. Chosen one, you are no longer trying to be chosen. You are living as one who knows they are. And that knowing changes how you walk, how you speak, how you respond. You do not rush. You do not compete. You do not explain. You move with quiet confidence, trusting that what is meant for you will find you. This is not passivity. It is authority under control. It is strength that does not need to announce itself. It is faith that does not panic when unseen. And as you continue walking this way, the world will continue to respond, not because you demanded recognition, but because alignment is unmistakable. You did not lose anything by stepping away from crowds. You gained yourself. And now, as you stand rooted, calm, and whole, the world begins to recognize what God has been forming all along. Chosen one, this is where the journey settles into something gentle and unshakable. You stop apologizing for needing space, for choosing solitude, for protecting the quiet where God speaks to you most clearly. What you once explained away as being too different is now understood for what it truly is: obedience. You were never withdrawing out of fear or pride. You were responding to a divine design that required stillness to grow. You begin to recognize that your peace is not a personality trait, not a mood, not a preference. It is part of your calling. God entrusted you with a depth that cannot survive constant noise, and He taught you to guard it without guilt. Where you once questioned yourself for outgrowing certain spaces and people, you now offer yourself forgiveness. Growth always creates distance, not because love is gone, but because alignment has changed. Chosen one, you no longer chase connection at the cost of clarity. You choose quiet strength over loud validation, clean boundaries over constant access, and closeness with God over belonging everywhere else. And in that choice, something sacred happens. Your life becomes lighter. Your spirit becomes steadier. Your path becomes clearer. The story does not end with isolation. It ends with peace. And peace, chosen one, is the clearest proof that you are growing exactly as God intended.